and welcome to my makeshift performance studies presentation. Okay, so presentation I was going to give in class would have had a slightly different format, in that I was going to begin with a presentation of the central piece that I'm discussing. That's not really possible now, but I'll still cover the same issues, just in a little bit more of a haphazard way. So the piece that I'm going to be talking about is the piece that you can see behind me. It is by a Haitian composer called Werner A. Jägerhuber. Jägerhuber was born in Haiti, studied in Germany, and then moved back to Haiti and spent his life trying to ethnographize Haiti's musical culture. He wrote essays, he put together books of folk songs, but this is kind of his seminal work, which is a fusion of Western art song and Haitian folk music, with the intention, it seems, of educating the West on some of the key features of Haitian music, which at the time, and actually still to this day, are not really recognised or known about. So, Haiti, just a brief overview. Haiti is the oldest independent Caribbean island, which is relevant because you kind of get a sense, reading about Haiti, that they have, in some senses, got an undiluted culture. That's quite a tricky phrase because Haiti was colonised by so many people, and has been up until actually very recently. In fact, they only stopped paying reparations to France in the, I believe it was the 1950s. And so a lot of Haitian culture comes from a multitude of sources. It's kind of a melting pot, if you will, of all of the different people who have ever been in control of Haitian people. That being said, Haiti did have an indigenous group of people, and so a lot of the things that they hold very central in their musical practices are still the case, but if you take, for instance, their language, which we'll get onto a bit later, that is a real mixture of French and Spanish and original Haitian, if there's any of that left, which is quite tricky to understand, but also a mixture of African languages, which makes performance in Britain in 2020 fairly difficult, and I'll go over some of the reasons for that. I'm going to be discussing the performance related issues that this piece holds in terms of language, the restriction in language, the issue of translation, the issue of taking translations from... There is a translation that is printed with the score, but a Haitian scholar, Benjamin Hebblethwaite, he's an American, he produced a translation as well, which is actually quite different and makes the performance very different in terms of the context of and the content and the feeling behind it, which is... All of those things are what singers need, you know, what all musicians need, but for singers we have our voices, which is the instrument, fine, but the text is a big vehicle through which we convey any kind of meaning. So, translation. The piece that I have presented here, with the original translation on the left and the Hebblethwaite's translation on the right, which is taken from a book called Voodoo Songs in Haitian and Creole. You can't see on the screen, but the translation that comes with the original score writes the Haitian as meaning Urzili, who is a spirit, that because this is a spirit deity-based polytheistic religion. And this song cycle is dedicated to 4 of those deities, and they are beseeching various... Each deity is responsible for a different area of life. So this is me, the singer, the performer, begging for these deities to intervene in my life and to help me in various aspects of my life. It might be familial, harvest, etc. So, but the translation that is presented of Erzili Malade is the name of the first piece. And in modern French, we understand malade to be a malady, a sickness, which is exactly what Hebblethwaite translates it as. Erzili is sick. But the translation that is presented in the score, which was provided by the editor, Valerio Knez, who was a close personal friend of Jägerhuber, his translation is Erzili is angry. Now I suspect, and it's certainly not written in stone, but I suspect that angry comes from... I suspect that the true meaning is somewhere between angry and sick, in the sense that it's probably a nuanced Haitian religious, voodoo religious term that people from Haiti would automatically understand. That presents issues for us in the West, in a monotheistic religion that we've been brought up in. I'm personally agnostic, so I you know, as a singer, we sing religious texts all the time, but this is quite different, and I don't have any kind of background in this. I found the piece because I'm going into ethnomusicology, and the Caribbean is something that I'm very interested in, and I've loved singing it, but it does have quite a lot of serious issues to do with my performance of it, being a white woman, a middle class white woman in central Britain in 2020. This is kind of an issue within this piece as well. You can kind of see that a little bit better. This piece is called Gwa Loa Moi. As you can see, I don't know if you can, but the piece is spelt Gorslooamoin. So it looks like French, Gros Loa Moi, but in fact, Hebblethwaite's translation, which is produced under the original, just there, is more phonetic. And actually, Valerio Knez, in his very opening of the score with the translation, says that the pronunciation of this piece is made even more difficult by the introduction of words from African languages. So, and this is partly because Haitian Creole wasn't written down for a really long time, as, you know, a lot of languages weren't. But this is particularly prominent in this one because of its constantly changing nature. It was a way of communicating, first and foremost, with each other orally. And the musical tradition in Haiti is an oral one, really. This is the first time that, in 1950, this is the first time that anybody's written any of this stuff down. And certainly the first time it's ever been published and produced to the extent that someone might be able to access it in modern Western settings. So, yeah. But the reason I bring this up in relation to translation is that the Gwa Loa Moi is translated very differently, significantly differently, which affects performance. So in the original one that Valerio Knez produces, he says that the translation is "Great spirit of mine, oh God Zimbi, great spirit of mine, Papa Zimbi, my little boat is now standing still and can't cross the bay. Oh, I wonder, great spirit of mine, what can it be?" But Benjamin Hebblethwaite's version is actually significantly different. He translates the question, this is a central question, differently. And he translates it as, I'm asking, what is this thing? I can't talk about it. Oh, I can't talk about it. So obviously, there's a very big difference in the subtext of this, depending on where the translations come from. So for Valerio Knez's, it's more of a, how to describe it? It's more of a simple question. What can it be? I don't know. Let's discuss it. Whereas for Hebblethwaite, it's more philosophical. The speaker can't speak about it. but is nonetheless questioning. I suspect it's implied internally, or at least Hebblethwaite views the piece by Yeagerhuber as being an internal dialogue and an internal conversation and an internal question. But it does mirror the issues that I'm having in singing the piece, because there's a sense of, what is this? I can't talk about it. It could be that he can't talk about it in the sense that it's too difficult, or it just could be that there aren't words to... There aren't appropriate translations. There aren't appropriate words to put this phenomenon into context. And that's tricky for a singer. You kind of want to have something concrete to go on. And there's not a lot concrete in this. So, yeah. The next thing... Oh, so a similar situation with Marassa Ayo. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is pronunciation. I've spoken a little bit about this, but all of the writing's backwards, which is excellent. Basically, Creole looks like French but isn't. This is the first piece in the cycle, As il est malade, and it is in French, in the sense that they use very much the grammar is the same as modern French, and a lot of the words are the same. However, some of it's written phonetically, as you can't really see, but the first word in the piece is way, and this is supposed to, as you can see in Hebblethwaite's version, it's written as we, modern English we. It's actually way. I think that seems to be. I've had to take a combination of Valerio Knez's writings and Hebblethwaite's and kind of come up with one, potentially of my own, which has been really difficult. But yeah, so it's the trickiest part in terms of the translation is words like Genyen, which are spelt in the score as, hang on, Ganguin, but Genyen is how Hebblethwaite thinks it should be said, and he speaks Haitian Creole, so I just kind of have to go off that. Remembering that the translation that Valerio Knez produced was in fact presumably for people who already spoke Haitian Creole, and I'm not one of them. So the next thing I kind of want to talk about is the performance-driven musical decisions that one makes performing this piece, and there are a few of them. In the Marassa piece, so this piece is about family, but this particular part, the final stave of the bottom system, is of the first page, is really tricky, because as you can see, I'll just go from a little bit before. You've got a phrase that goes. So here's the issue. So you've got, but the next line, the next short sub-phrase, there aren't enough syllables for notes. So whereas in the first half you've got the mpa joined. I've come to the decision that the only way to get round this is to, I don't know what the word is, essentially hum the So you're left with from the text setting on the physical page, it does seem that this might be an option, but because it's the first time, I don't know how clearly you can see it, but it's the first time that the and part are spread over two notes physically in the score, rather than just being under one note as they are at the beginning of that line. And that comes back later. It is so tricky from a performance point of view and a learning point of view to remember when you go, because trying to, I know that the first one is smushed together, and I know that the second one is separate, but approaching it and doing it are two, knowing it and doing it are two different things, because you get into the flow of the piece and suddenly you're having to, it's a very physical thing, you're having to physically prevent what would normally be just a reflex of making a consonant singing, and you're which is goes against our Western classical singing repertoire and technique and learning, so that has been a particular challenge. The other thing that's kind of an issue here is repeats. This piece is hugely repetitive and full of repeats. In the case of the first piece, it's every line, more or less. I think every line bar one is the subject of a repeat, and that's a theme that continues, because folk songs are repetitive and they do say the same things. That is a universal constant, really, because you're supposed to be able to remember them, because it's an oral tradition, because everybody knows them, everybody's got to know them, they're part of the community. But in Western singing, we're always told that if you repeat something, you're supposed to make it different the second time, and that's quite tricky here. The other problem with repeats is that I'm having to make this piece fit into the context of my recitals, so 30 minutes. I think I've allowed for it pretty well, but following a proper timing of the whole thing, realistically, I don't know whether I'm going to have to cut some repeats, and does that change the meaning? I don't know, it's quite tricky to know, really. And as I said previously, I'm agnostic, but in these pieces I'm worshipping deities that I really have very little concept of. I've read a lot now about it all, and I'm writing an essay on it, and that's great, but I wasn't brought up in this, and there is a part of me that feels like perhaps I'm somehow appropriating something, or by getting rid of things I don't know. It's a very tricky issue, which is something else that I want to talk about. Entries in tempi, again, this is Invocation to Damballa. A lot of them are quite lacking in detail. The other thing about this particular piece, this does have a direction, actually. This says grave, but that's all you get. And some of them there's not even that. So, but I will just briefly demonstrate what's going on with this one. So the issue surrounding this one is that quite a lot of the entries, which you'll be able to see, are unaccompanied, in the sense that the piano plays a part and the singer comes in. But that creates an issue with the opening, because, you know, should we keep it strictly in time, so or just do it as a kind of chant? So the beginning goes, and it's my thinking that the piano should go rather than being really strict with it. Otherwise, you kind of end up with this disjointed thing where, let's see if I can play it. So yeah, so that's that issue. Finally, the last thing I want to briefly talk about is this idea of cultural appropriation. I've kind of touched on it a bit, but Marvin Carlson's book Performance, A Critical Introduction, speaks about social drama theory liminality, theatre theorism, etc., and includes ethnographic assessments, which I'm sure Jägerhuber would have found hugely impressive. But at the very core of this is whether a white girl from Cambridge should really be performing a piece, a song cycle, in worship of these deities that I really have no idea about. I really have no concept of what that belief system is. And is that offensive? I was thinking about it in terms of I know that one doesn't because of rules. So it's a hypothetical, it's theoretical. But if I were to sing a piece with text taken from the Quran, I think I would feel uncomfortable about that, and that I was appropriating another culture and causing offence unnecessarily. Now, this is very much further removed than that. And I like to think that Jägerhuber really just would have been interested in having somebody perform it. He wrote it, he published it, he went to the effort of having it published by his friend Valeria Knez, and it was written for Knez's wife, Madame Andrea Gauthier Knez. And they were very close friends, and he wrote it for her, and I like to think, and she was a dramatic soprano, so coincidentally, exactly my voice type, which has been good. And I just really like to think that he would really just appreciate it being performed fundamentally, and that's kind of it. Yeah, so thanks for listening.